I'm Rabbi Eitan Levy, host of the Jewish Geography podcast. I got a lot of complaints about the rhythm I put in the background of the last episode. Thanks for writing, folks. The offending sounds have been exorcised from this episode completely. Today is the first installment of what I hope to make a monthly feature of the podcast called Happy Hour. I'm going to focus on reasons we should be happy, not superficial, look at this new gadget, or here's a picture of a cute little kitty, kind of happy, but things that can really help us to be grateful for the wonderful lives that most of us are given, even with illness and heartache, financial problems, and even when we have tragedy in our lives. Sorry to disappoint that this doesn't have anything to do with cheap alcohol, but if a drink would make you happy, please enjoy a beer while you listen, unless you're driving or at work or, use your common sense, okay? Don't just blindly do what the podcast man tells you. Now, on with the show. This is the first installment of Happy Hour on the Jewish Geography podcast. Why do so many of us walk around so intensely focused on the negative? The news is totally full of bad news. If it bleeds, it leads. But why is that? Why are we more interested in the bad news? Why do we crave it, apparently? Sometimes maybe we're just super self-centered and we focus on all the problems we have, what's wrong, what we need to do better, or what we want for ourselves that's better. Sometimes maybe really important things, to be loved the way we want, paid what we think we deserve, stuff like that. Real important things, but still. Or maybe we're idealists who want to save the world, or maybe at least improve it a little bit. So we have to pay attention to everything that's wrong around us, right? That's legitimate. But in the end, if that's all we focus on, it's a pretty dim view of the world around us. Luckily, the internet has answers for this problem. There are puppy pictures and cat videos. There are BuzzFeed listicles that tickle our hearts and give us the warm fuzzies. But where's the real good news? It seems to me part of the problem is that good news is usually boring. It's more often than not about things that didn't happen. To get enough perspective to understand why something good is also important, we have to zoom out to historical perspective. Like, if I told you the number of murders in Israel last year, that sounds at best unremarkable, that is boring, and at worst pretty bad. But what if I compared it to the number of Jews killed in Israel 20 years ago? What about 50 years ago? How about in 1948, when 1% of the population of the country died in the War of Independence? What about in Europe a few years before that? How about over the last 2,000 years, minus 70 of stateless wandering? When you look at it that way, you see this is the safest time in the history of the world to be a Jew, and for that matter, to be a person in the world. Even in the times of the great Jewish kingdoms, we didn't have the kind of military supremacy over our neighbors and societal regularity and safety that we have today. Not even close. All those rules about like women staying home that they have in traditional societies, especially at night. Well, it used to be once night fell, it was just dark, just completely dark outside. It was really dangerous to be out on the street. Once you stepped out that door, someone could just grab you right there in the middle of the street. They didn't have to catch you in a dark corner because everywhere was dark. When they first introduced street lighting in big cities like London and Paris, some people thought it meant they wouldn't need police anymore. They were wrong, obviously, but it made a huge difference. People could go out at night and be safe. Can you imagine a world before public spaces were lit up at night? I'm a tour guide, and I take people on trails all over Israel, including the Path of the Patriarchs in Gush Etzion, near where I live here in the beautiful village of Tekoa. Did you know that in the days of the temple, people traveled on these roads in big groups, caravans of hundreds of people, never alone? Why do you think they did that? Was it because they were more social? We've just all become self-obsessed, selfie-taking zombies compared to our social butterfly ancestors. No, it's because it was so dangerous. The roads were so lawless, even in daylight, that you were likely to be robbed and killed if you ventured out alone. And in case you think that's just ancient history, it was still the case in this area just 150 years ago. In the 1860s, Sir Moses Montefiore, a rich English Jew, built housing for Jerusalem's impoverished Jews to move into outside the old city walls. Inside the old city, it was cramped, disease-ridden, sewage in the streets, disease spread like wildfire. He built nice, clean, modern, for the age, housing, and a windmill to provide them a livelihood. It's still there. I'd be happy to take you to see it. But people at first refused to move out because they were more afraid of roving bandits than they were of cholera. Thank God they eventually did move out and eventually expanded the Jewish area into what today is West Jerusalem. But it took a few years to get over the deeply ingrained fear of any space that wasn't walled in. The other day, I took my 6-year-old son on a hike on the Patriarch's Path, just him and me. It was after a rain, and he was jumping over puddles and having a great time. And even with the situation how it is now, with this stabbing intifada or whatever you want to call it going on, I was just a little bit more aware of my surroundings than usual. I wasn't seriously afraid. I wasn't expecting to be killed because I was out there by myself. But it didn't used to be that way back in the day. So the next time you go out into nature or out on the street after dark and you don't feel a twinge of danger, you don't start to sweat and feel your heart pulsating from fear, be grateful. Now is an amazing time to be alive. Baruch Shechianu. Blessed be he who has brought us to this day. And that does it for this episode of the Jewish Geography Podcast. I hope to be making a happy hour where I help us all find things to be grateful for, a regular feature on the Jewish Geography Podcast. Please let me know if you like this sort of shorter setup for the podcast, or if you prefer the longer, more in-depth work that I did on the last podcast, more like half an hour. Write to me if you have any thoughts about the podcast or suggestions for future episodes, or you want to reach me for any reason. Please send me an email at Eitan, that's E-I-T-A-N, at rabbieitan.com. Please subscribe to Jewish Geography on iTunes or on any other podcasting platform in the world through my website, rabbieitan.com, RABBIEITAN.com. In the meantime, God bless you and have a wonderful week.